Welcome to the Mr. Spectre channel.
The chilling realization came not from the outside, but from within the very structure designed to keep me safe. It began with the sense that something was moving, somewhere it shouldn't be. Not in the room, but in the walls of the house itself. The time was 4 a.m. I lay awake, listening to what I first dismissed as a faint dripping sound. It wasn't water. It was the sound of muffled whispering, emanating from the hollow space between the drywall. The sounds were erratic, like a conversation smothered by thick fabric, or perhaps the static of a live feed, a noise that felt unnervingly conscious and alive. Suddenly, the whispering ceased. It was replaced by the worst feeling imaginable: absolute, heavy silence. The silence pressed down on my chest with such weight that it felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Just as I was about to exhale a sigh of relief, an anonymous text message flashed across my phone screen. No number, no sender name, just a stark message. "Listen closer. This is for you." That was the moment I knew the sounds were not mechanical failures or pests, but a deliberate, targeted communication played from within my own walls, designed to lure me into a dangerous game. I had recently moved into this old house, a sturdy 70-year-old structure riddled with hidden cavities and long-forgotten secrets. After receiving that text, my nights lost their meaning of rest. My life became a horrifying routine, waiting for the white noise to begin and recording it. I began to meticulously document every occurrence. Every night, at roughly the same time, between 3:30 and 4:30 a.m., the noise would start, and sometimes lasting for half an hour without interruption. To hear it clearly, I had to shut down everything, all lights off, phones silenced, and I even practiced breathing silently. In the midst of the vague murmurings, I finally managed to snatch one clear word, just one word, something that sounded like Maria, my mother's name. A cold tremor shot down my spine. How could someone inside the walls of my house know my mother's name, especially since we had just recently relocated to the city? This was not a physical break-in. It was an intrusion into my personal life and memory. A private investigator came, knocked on the walls, and declared, "There's no one here. It's probably just old wiring causing acoustic anomalies." But I didn't trust him. I bought a sensitive microphone and an audio amplifier, taping it firmly to my bedroom wall. That night, the white noise returned. This time, I processed the recorded audio on my computer using specialized filtering software. The background static dissolved, and the human voices became distinctly clear. What I heard was not a casual conversation. It was a fixed, mechanical repetition, as if played from a recorder. The voice repeated in an endless loop: 3, 5, 7, get out. You are not alone. This was a code, a precise instruction being broadcast for me to act upon. The following day, I existed in a state of semi-sleep, fixated on the code. 357, room 357, a license plate. I tried to link it to everything in my life, but nothing made logical sense. That night, the noise returned, but with a new sensory addition. Near the wall where the whispering originated, I detected a strange odor, the smell of old metal, moisture, and something akin to burnt, decaying wood. The fear was replaced by an urgent compulsion to act. I decided to execute the code: 357. The time was 3:57 a.m. I retrieved a small hatchet from the shed, my hands slick with sweat. At 3:57 a.m., with the whispering noise reaching its crescendo, I delivered a heavy blow to the wall with the back of the hatchet. Plaster and dust rained down, creating a large hole. Behind the drywall was a hollow cavity, a hidden void in the structure, patched over with old bricks and wooden planks. And inside that void, there were no animals or faulty wires. What glistened in the gloom was a small, antique wooden box suspended by a thin chain. With trembling hands, I pulled the box out. It was heavy. Inside, there was an old voice recorder playing the continuous loop of 3, 5, 7, the exact sound that had been filling my nights. But beneath the recorder was something else, a small leather-bound notebook. On the first page, written in faded, shaky handwriting, was the inscription, "We are watching. code of silence, Maria. The notebook contained meticulous, time-stamped details of my daily life in this new house, my entry and exit times, the names of my friends, and even my recent grocery purchases. The entries were clearly recent, dated to the past few weeks. This meant one thing. Someone had placed that box very recently inside the wall. They were not just playing a sound to scare me. They were living nearby, gathering intimate intelligence and presenting it as a warning, not a direct threat, while daring me to find it. They knew I had to break the wall exactly at 3:57 a.m. Who was doing this and why? I still didn't know, but I knew the watcher was still out there, and the game had begun.
Deep, calm, and suspenseful narrator with an unsettling, serious tone. Years before I moved into this house and became entangled in the white noise game, my first true experience with conscious intrusion occurred when I was a student living in a small old dormitory. This incident, now eerily connected, laid the groundwork for my current paranoia. I lived in room 207 and maintained a relatively private life. My only dedicated means of communication was an old landline phone in my room, primarily used for calls with my mother. I was cautious and never shared my personal information or address widely. One day, while I was studying at the library, my friend, Dan, called me on my cell phone and said, "Who called your room? You didn't pick up, but there was a very strange noise on the line." When I returned to my room, I noticed the telephone receiver was lying off hook on the table. It meant someone had left the phone off the hook for a long time without disconnecting, and my line was active. As I picked up the receiver to hang it up, a weak, static-laced sound came through the earpiece. It was the sound of a conversation in the background, accompanied significant static and the sound of a creaking door. Using headphones and recording software, I amplified the voices. It was a woman's voice, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "You have to tell him what he's getting himself into. That address, that damn address." And then a man's voice responded, "No, he's not ready yet. Let us finish our work. If he finds out we never hung up the phone, he'll panic and run." They believed the call had been disconnected, but due to a technical fault, or perhaps a deliberate tampering with the dorm's wiring, my phone had become a listening device for their secret conversation. I spent days and weeks listening to that conversation whenever I picked up the phone. Slowly, the puzzle pieces aligned. They were talking about an address they clearly intended for me to find. One night, the woman's voice rose in exasperation. She screamed, 2841, tell him 2841 before it's too late, before he... The man quickly silenced her, and the static abruptly ended. The voices never returned. Immediately, I searched for the number 2841 on a map service. It corresponded to an old, abandoned industrial building on the outskirts of the city. Driven by a terrifying sense of obligation, I got into my car and drove there. It was 2 a.m. when I arrived. The building was dark and terrifying. I entered the desolate structure. The main room was filled with dust and old machinery. On an antique metal desk, I found one thing: a sealed envelope addressed to me. Inside the envelope was a short, handwritten note that read, "Have a good day. You knew you were listening. We guided you here. This is done." And beneath the note was a small silver key. That night, I understood the true horror. I had been manipulated. They wanted me to find that address and retrieve that key. The open phone line was not a technical glitch. It was a trap used to coerce me into a dangerous journey. They had used me to relay a cryptic message, and now I possessed an unknown object. I kept the key, never figuring out what its lock was. Now, years later, with the wooden box and the white noise in my wall, I recognize the pattern. I am once again playing into a trap that was set years ago. When I examined the notebook I found in my wall more closely, I saw a tiny mark on the leather cover, a subtle etching of the same industrial address, 2841, where I had been lured years ago. And the silver key? Now I know what the key is for. It fits the tiny lock on the wooden box I found in my wall. This means the person inside the wall is the same entity who guided me to the abandoned building years ago. They are not merely a threat, they are a watcher and a mastermind of terror who hides in the structure of my homes, communicating only to propel me towards an unknown goal. What is their ultimate objective, and what are they preparing me for? I know this story is far from over, and that is the most terrifying thing of all.
My name is Ethan Clarke, and what I'm about to tell you is the reason I will never, ever sleep in silence again. When I moved into my new house on Willow Lane last winter, I knew one thing. The place was cheap, old, and far too quiet. I thought I needed the solitude. I was wrong. Night 2. At around 2:14 a.m., the first strange thing happened. I heard a faint tapping sound coming from the living room. I assumed it was the heater or the house settling, but when I went downstairs, the sound stopped instantly. The sound wasn't what terrified me. It was the fact that the TV, which wasn't plugged in, had turned on by itself. There was no channel, no static, just a black screen with a thin white line of text. "Hello, Ethan." I froze. No Wi-Fi, no smart devices, no power to the TV at all. I reached out to turn it off, but the screen flickered and new text appeared. "You can hear us now." "Us?" I whispered. The TV went black. I told myself I was exhausted, stressed, imagining things. I turned to go back upstairs, but the house answered. As I climbed the stairs, each step behind me creaked, perfectly synced with mine. When I reached the top and turned around, the hallway was empty. I barely slept that night. Night 3. Again at 2:14 a.m., I woke to a sound. Scratching. Not on the floor, not on the window. The sound was coming from inside the wall beside my bed. Slow, deliberate scratching, like someone writing letters with their fingernails. I pressed my ear to the wall. Tap, tap, scratch. With a shaking voice, I asked, "What do you want?" The scratching stopped. Then, in a soft breath, like a mouth pressed against the other side of the drywall, I heard, "Find Daniel." I jumped back. Daniel? I didn't know anyone named Daniel. Not yet. The basement discovery. On the 5th day, I finally forced open the basement door. Cold, stale air washed over me. The basement was nearly empty, except for an old wooden workbench. On it sat a dusty metal box. Inside were a broken wristwatch, a folded map of the neighborhood, a photograph of a young boy, and on the back, Daniel Hayes, 2004. My stomach dropped. The name the house whispered. The basement light flickered. I looked up, then back at the workbench, and froze. The items inside the box had rearranged themselves. The photograph now stood upright, facing me, and on the wall behind the workbench, scratched through the dust, were the words, "Bring him home." I whispered, "I don't know who he is." My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You will." The final night. I tried leaving the house, but every time I stepped outside, an invisible pressure pushed me back. My vision blurred, my ears rang. The house didn't want me to leave. At 2:14 a.m., the walls began to tremble, just enough to tell me something inside them was waking up. The scratching started again, faster, urgent. I followed the sound with a flashlight down the hallway. It led me to the closet at the end of the hall. The rusty handle turned easily, too easily. Inside, the walls were covered with children's drawings, all drawn in faded blue crayon, all showing the same image: a small boy standing in a house and a tall, dark figure watching him from the doorway. In the last drawing, the boy was gone. Only the shadow remained. Behind me, a whisper, close enough to feel the breath, said, "Find him, Ethan, before he finds you." I spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the drawings, they were different. Every one of them now showed me, standing in the closet, holding the flashlight, with the tall shadow behind me. I ran. What I know now. Daniel Hayes disappeared in 2004. The case was never solved. The previous owner of my house? Michael Hayes, Daniel's father. The police think he abandoned the house. They're wrong. The house is keeping them, or their memories, or something much worse.
And now, it's keeping me too. Every night at 2:14 a.m., the walls whisper again, the unplugged TV turns on, the drawings change, and last night, for the first time, it wasn't a whisper. Someone inside the wall screamed my name. I hope you enjoyed the content. For more videos, subscribe to our channel and activate the bell.